Hey guys, welcome back to Andrew Invest. Today I wanted to talk to you about Man United. I promise this is still investing related. So, Man United is an English football club that currently trades on the New York Stock Exchange for a market cap valuation of around $3.7 billion. And yet there are several bidders willing to buy the club for the owner's valuation of at least $6 billion. That means that if you buy the shares today, you will make a 60% profit if the deal goes through. As a comparison, Microsoft recently made an offer to buy Activision, and it is contingent on competition regulators basically approving the deal. And the stock was trading at a 20% discount to what Microsoft had offered for the stock, and now 10%. So why is the difference in this premium so different for Man United? Especially when you consider that other football clubs such as Chelsea very recently were bought for a valuation of around $5.5 billion. So really not that much less. So that valuation is definitely feasible, and I think investors are mostly concerned about whether the deal itself will go through. So today I want to talk about, is the deal going to go through, and how can we profit from it as investors? I'm personally really interested in this, and I might actually get in on it myself. So today I want to talk about my thesis, and without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay guys, so to properly understand the mechanics behind this arbitrage play, I think we need to understand how the share structure of Man United is set up and also how it is currently owned. So 69% of Manchester United is currently owned by the Glazer family, its current owners, and all of the Glazers family shares are Class B shares. Now Class B shares are effectively dominant shares in the club. They have 10 times the votes of Class A shares, which are the ones that you can buy on the New York Stock Exchange. That means that you have very little voting power, even if you were to buy all of the shares that are currently publicly listed on the New York Stock Exchange. The reason why it's really important to understand the dual share class of Manchester United is because in the US, where the Class A shares are listed, there are no rules on something called mandatory offers. Mandatory offers are rules put in place to protect minority shareholders in the case of takeovers like this. So if a individual or company was to buy a company and they reach a share threshold of 30%, they are effectively forced to put a bid in to buy the remaining 70% of the company for the same price per share. Now, in the case of Manchester United, if a potential buyer was to buy the 69% of the club that the Glazers own, they could potentially not make any offer for the rest of the shares owned by potentially you if you were to buy the Class A shares, and they would have a majority stake in the company, and your shares would basically plummet down back to what price they were pre-takeover talks and rumors. So you would be on the hook for a big loss. And that's why the rules are in place in the vast majority of countries other than the US and a few other ones. With that kind of risk, should we just write off buying Man United shares entirely? Because the risk is clearly very high. Not necessarily. So the favourite to buy the club is a very wealthy Qatari who's actually a member of the royalty, Sheikh Jassim. And he wants to completely 100% take over the club. And although he could potentially change his mind at some point and leave the Class A shares publicly listed, if he was to take the club private, i.e. not have to give financial statements every quarter and provide much more information on the state of the club's finances, he would have to actually buy 100% of the shares, including the Class A shares. And that's what he says he wants to do. Now, with Sheikh Jassim, that's not the only person who's interested, obviously. The second favourite is called Sir Jim Ratcliffe. He basically wants to buy the club via his company called Ineos. And it's been confirmed that he would only buy the Glazer family stake and he would leave the other 31% of the club listed on the New York Stock Exchange. This would be because it would be a lot cheaper for him, and also the downsides of having a publicly listed club clearly aren't that big a deal to him, especially when you barely have any rights as a Class A shareholder anyway. I personally believe that Sheikh Jassim is almost certainly going to be the new owner of Manchester United. And that's because for Qatar and for him, money really is no object. He's not trying to buy the club to be a business that makes money for him. He's aiming to buy the club to effectively improve the image of the country of Qatar and sports wash, if you want to use that term. So Qatar in 2013 bought a different football club called PSG, who are basically the biggest club in France in a very small league, which isn't that internationally popular. And the whole idea behind them was that they would dominate their league and also the Champions League, which is the European League. Now, that hasn't happened at all, and PSG really hasn't made much of an international following because of the smallness of its domestic league. This opportunity to buy into Manchester United represents an opportunity to buy into the world's most popular league, one of the world's most popular clubs, and if they have to ditch PSG in order to do that, they will happily do so. No price is an object for them. If you look at the wealth of the Qatari royal family, who is almost certainly subsidizing this bid, although it may not necessarily be immediately clear, it's £275 billion. $6 billion is chump change to them. It's literally nothing. Like, they really don't care about money. When they bought PSG, they were well known for basically spending a huge amount of money on various different players like Messi, Mbappe, all of these highly expensive players, without thinking at all about whether the club was going to turn a profit. And at the moment, there's a bidding war between the Qataris and Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who is rumoured to be making a bid based off debt that he will use to buy Manchester United. Whatever the price Sir Jim can pay, the Qataris can match it, if not double or triple it. They probably won't do that. They'll try and get the right price, but they really won't care about price, in my opinion. So there have recently been some rumours in the press that the Glazers aren't actually going to sell the club and they're considering actually staying as majority shareholders. I personally think that this is untrue and they're rumours leaked to the press by the Glazers themselves in order to increase the bids by the interested parties. And for me, it really doesn't make sense that they would keep a hold of the club when they can receive such inflated bids for a business that's fundamentals are pretty awful when you compare it to any other publicly listed company in the S&P 500. If you look at the fundamentals here, the revenue of Man United has basically been flat over the last 5 to 10 years. It's increased in the last 10 years, but over the last 5 years, it's basically been flat. The debt of the club is sky high. It's leveraged pretty highly. The profitability of the club is declining over the last few years, and other clubs are selling for huge valuations. Now is the time to sell your club. Finally, I want to show you guys this article by a executive director in a specialist investment company that owns shares in Manchester United, and his reasoning behind why he thinks the Glazers are almost certainly going to sell the club very soon. And I'm pretty convinced by this, to be honest. So, the economics of owning a Premier League team are changing. The Premier League is going gangbusters. It's got all the money and it's killing every other league. That's why it's attracting private equity and investors from the Gulf. You've got to have a lot of money, effectively, to compete with these other companies. The Glazers can't afford to own Man United. Joel and Avram Glazer are front and centre, but there are 4 other members of the family. They don't necessarily operate as one entity. They've spent very little on property, plant and equipment, Carrington, the training ground, and Old Trafford. The Glazers aren't poor, but they don't want to invest. The share price has done very little for a long time, but we bought shares in the club before the announcement in November because we could see that the probability of a sale was increasing and the upsides of a sale are significant. There has never been a better moment to sell, so we asked who would want to buy. If private equity owns it, the aim is to sell it for a higher price. They would run it as a killer business. If the Qataris own it, there is no requirement for a financial return, like I was saying. They would own it because they want to be seen to own it. If you put aside the ethics from a strictly financial point of view, if you're a fan, you want it to be them. Everybody realizes there is a window here. The team is broadly speaking on the up. There is the post-World Cup buzz. Premier League TV rights just keep going up and up. The Qataris would not want small shareholders like us to share their investments in the club. They want full access to the cash flow. I'm pretty convinced they would offer to buy out smaller shareholders. And finally, he ends it by saying, I would expect a sale before the end of June. I'm not sure about the time frame, but I am very much convinced by this logic and this argument. So I actually would be considering a small punt on this as an arbitrage play. I wouldn't put a huge amount of money, but I think I would definitely be strongly considering putting in a small amount of my money in order to make a 60% gain. So I hope you enjoyed this video explaining the process behind Manchester United's sale and how you as an investor can potentially make a large profit from it. If you did like it, please like and subscribe the video. Like the video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys next time.